Hey guys, can you guys hear me? Hello everybody. Let me turn my music off here. I need to get like a one of those intros where people can just press the button and they have like an intro. I need to make one of those for myself. How you doing, AR?
I'm doing well. You're talking way above my pay grade, making intros so people can hit buttons. And good Lord, I'm lucky if I even make it to the show. Let me tell you.
I mean, I like to make videos and stuff, but the editing of it and all of that stuff, after a while, it gets very tedious and I never think it's good enough. And then there's so many I don't even put out. So I like this live interaction a lot. For me, this is a lot more fun.
Well, I definitely enjoy working with you. I don't know. You mean we're supposed to actually enjoy making videos and then going behind the scenes and editing all? Oh, God almighty. I'm leaving the platform. I'm done. See ya. Gotta go.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I mean, it's fun. Sometimes I'll get a creative streak and I want to do it, but it is a lot of work. And it doesn't really hit for everybody. Some people like it, but I still do it anyway. So welcome everybody. We have AR Hayes joining me here on my channel. He's also streaming on his channel. But we just wanted to continue our conversation from, I think it was over a week ago, where we just kind of dove into the Idaho 4. And since the last time we talked, there has been a lot of stuff going on. What do you think?
It's flying around, isn't it?
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, there's just so much, and it can become overwhelming because we already have so many unknowns, and we're getting these little puzzle pieces that we have to try to put into somewhere, and we don't know which puzzle it goes to. I mean, it's a lot. So what do you think is the most interesting thing that's come out since the last time we talked?
Man, I mean, there's been so much to come out. I mean, just the transcripts themselves of the closed hearing, that's always interesting because, all of that was said in the dark where none of us could watch or see. So we're sitting back here, kind of waiting to see if we're ever going to learn anything out of that. We're scratching our heads, making up theories, and next thing you know, we have it all before us, and everybody's diving into it. We all have a different interpretation of things that we're thinking or seeing. And the one thing I always kind of do, and my wife would joke around with all of you, is I get into my computer chair and I just kind of lean back like I'm the master operator of a complete, telemarketing room or something. But I just kind of let my mind go back to the day of when I sat in that defendant's chair and I went through each of these steps. And it's hard for me to fathom that so many people don't fully understand how many steps literally happen in these cases. I mean, it's day by day, something new is always happening, whether it be between your lawyers or whether it be in the courtroom. So for me, it's just kind of cool to sit back and not be the one enduring it. I get to actually watch it happening and then listen to people talk about it. But I mean, we all knew there was going to be more DNA found in that home. We all knew something like that was going to come out, and how were they going to piece that together? And then, of course, it did. A couple of unidentified samples came out. Now people are running all different directions with those, and it's wild. It's crazy. But now we're getting into even more important motions of what's going to be allowed to be spoken upon in the courtroom. What is this judge going to literally exclude from the courtroom that, we watched it in the Delphi case. We're seeing it in the Karen Reed case. We're seeing the behind the scenes. We're going to keep stuff shady quiet. We're going to keep it out of the courtroom and just wait, when these things start getting presented of what's not going to be allowed at the uproar of the people that feel already as though justice isn't going the proper way. And just wait till some of these things get negated and this judge puts his foot down and says, well, I'm not going to allow this testimony. I'm not going to allow this. And I'll tell you what, we're all going to be shaking our heads. We're all going to be shaking our heads. But this is
so that's interesting because you've been on that end of it and you know what that feels like. It's not going to shock you then if he comes out and says you can't use a third party culprit defense. perhaps? I mean, what do you think about that?
I absolutely expect that. I
Yeah.
absolutely expect that this judge is going to put his foot down. We're not going to be talking about the extra DNA. We're not going to be talking about various things of what car was in the neighborhood at what time. They're going to direct this to go right into the expert testimony. And I
Hmm.
think people really just need to get settled right now with the fact this is going to be a battle of experts. This isn't going to be your wild run of the mill. We're just going to run person after person up to the stand to have them testify.
Hmm.
You're going to have people that are going to testify to the character of the victims. You're going to have people that will get up and testify to the character of Bryan Kohberger.
Hmm.
Then you'll have experts that will get up and testify, of course, about the car, about the cell phone and all of that. That's gonna be the most boring part of the trial. We're gonna watch
Yeah.
that and fall asleep and just, good
Hmm.
lord, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
But for Ann Taylor to be able to create reasonable doubt in a case like this, it worries me because I think her hands are going to be tied. I really do think they're going to be tied.
Well, it's hard for me I'm an optimist at heart, and I'm not saying you aren't, because this is experience you're basing this off of, right? But being the optimist, I'm also a skeptic. So it's like a weird combo, because I'm skeptical of everything, but I'm still hoping for the best, hoping that like justice wins and all these things, right? But yeah, it's hard for me not to agree with you. Like, I do have a feeling it's just this whole DNA subject. If that isn't what is going to allow them to present this, because in the state's motion to deny a third party culprit, they really don't give any reason. They just state why third party culprits aren't allowed to be in, but then they don't elaborate on any of those things in their motion to say that's why it shouldn't be used here. And so they're not even trying. I feel like they gave like a D+ paper to the judge, because I guess they think he's just going to say, sure, I don't want it. But at what point? I mean, we have at least 2 other DNA. We know it was blood. And I don't care if it was first to second floor. The whole house is suspect. And then the glove outside. To say that, now I was looking through some papers, and I found this out that I forgot. There was some dispute. Bicca Barlow, and I believe even Bill Thompson, said that DNA was run through CODIS. It just didn't go any further than that. And so because they didn't do it, and they didn't develop the lead any further. So how can you exclude like, that's the perfect argument, I should think, but maybe I'm just hoping too much.
From everything that I've known through the years and watching all the people around me go through cases and myself go through cases, I absolutely believe what you're saying is exactly how we should feel. You need to
Hmm.
run every piece of DNA. You need to look at every fingerprint. You need to look at why certain windows are broken. You've got to examine everything and take that into a part of your investigation. That's why I've been screaming for all they could possibly hear. This was not a proper investigation. This
Right.
was literally your local community, police department they're not experienced at this. They're not capable of something like this. And then people yell back at me and say, well, yeah, the Idaho State Police, and you had okay, I get it. You still have to break them all down into the entities that they are, and they all work for themselves. They don't work together. The
Hmm.
FBI does not work with the Idaho State Police. The FBI does
Hmm.
not work with the Moscow Police Department. They're all separate.
Hmm.
So I always knew, and I think you and I have even talked about this
Hmm.
both on the platform and off the platform. I
Hmm.
knew the FBI was leading this entire investigation. This was
Hmm.
the FBI investigating,
Hmm.
because the FBI doesn't have to answer to anybody. They do what the hell they want when they want.
Right. So what makes it in what that actually helps me bring up a point I was thinking about talking with you, which is this federal grand jury. I had done a federal grand jury video way back when, and other people have too. And I feel like it's still not really settled. And I think we might have even talked about this last time, but there were these, I understand some federal grand juries just meet regularly and whatever, I don't know. But I don't even know the date of this federal grand jury, and I don't know who the subject of the federal grand jury was that Bryan Kohberger was brought up in. Was it just for him, or were, like I think we might have talked about last time, were they investigating local law enforcement, say, or something else happening in that area? And there were 100 subpoenas from that federal grand jury that I remember Eliza Mazoff was still trying to find. They weren't getting them. And, they knew what they were about, but they didn't know when they were issued. So she was trying to put that timeline together. And I'm just still I always go back to that federal grand jury. And I know, there's different reasons why people say it was out of state. It's drug related. It's a vicious crime, but I still feel like it was something else. I still feel like I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, because I've been around the block with the FBI enough times in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I've come to the realization if they have any inkling to investigate something, they're going to. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to answer to why or who they're looking at or what they're doing, because they literally do things their way behind the closed doors. And then when they get brought to the forefront, like, hey, you got to bring out this information. I mean, your prime example is the subpoenas that were through the federal grand jury that Massoff, I need the time frame of these. I need this extra documentation. And at
Yes.
that time, Judge John Judge says, well, what can we do to get that? And I'll try to get that. Well, we
Mm-hmm.
sit here today. They did not get that. It
They
did
still
not
don't
come.
have, right, right. So they have
They
the
never will.
substance of it, but not the actual, like when it was issued and what it was looking for, in other words, which is the whole
Right.
point of the investigation. That helps the defense see how you landed on your subject, and they keep hiding it because we know it came from the frickin' IGG. That's, I mean, in my,
Right.
like, is that disputable at this point? I mean, I just,
Well, when you say disputable, what do you mean disputable?
well, I guess,
Like, what do you mean?
the, in other words, legally, when they're presenting their case, what it sounds like, and even from the first time Bicca Barlow wrote her affidavit, she was saying, I suspect that they got to this subject solely based on the IgG component, right? That's how they narrowed down in on him. But I feel like there are still some people, I guess, and people have different opinions that don't think that the IgG is what led to it. They still feel like there was some like old fashioned detective work here in the background that, I'm sorry, I just don't see it.
Well, I think there's two parts of this investigation. I think that there's the FBI part of the investigation that did do some investigating. I think they did do some interviews and they did some various things.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the IgG. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the two parts of this actual investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Brett Payne just
Mm-hmm.
sat there until he got the dictation or the telling what to do by the
Yes.
FBI. Like, file this to get this. And that's why I still tell people, hold your breath, because we're going to watch this state case play out within the
Mm-hmm.
courts.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI is not done. The feds
Okay.
are not done with this.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be surprised
Mm-hmm.
at any point that this is looking either bad for the state,
Mm-hmm.
that the feds could jump in and file charges, just like what they're doing with Luigi Mangione over in
Mm-hmm.
New York City right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he is doubly charged right now, both through New York and through the feds. And you're
Mm-hmm.
watching, even while he's being catered into the New York courtroom,
Mm-hmm.
he's being treated like a federal inmate. He's coming in the vests and he's got the full details, walking him in. He's doing the
Mm-hmm.
perp walks. And they've done the same thing with Bryan Kohberger. When they flew him back on the plane, he was perp walked like he was a federal prisoner of
Yes.
war and all
Okay.
this
I
stuff.
understand what you're saying. This is actually really
Yeah.
fascinating parallel. Okay. I hear what you're saying.
All right. Like a state inmate that's being extradited back across the country. And again, here we go. I've been through this. I've been extradited numerous times because I had this tendency, different than what really Bryan Kohberger did, because I didn't get my parents in the car with me. I loaded up a group of girls in the car. We drove
Mhm.
around the country like wild people, running, just doing everything we could to evade the cops. I had, cash in my pocket rather than my credit card. I mean, this was literally on the run stuff.
Right, right.
So when they extradited me, it was very dark when they extradited me. It was very hidden. You didn't know when I was leaving,
Mhm,
where I was stopping. You never saw me. I couldn't make phone calls. I couldn't anything.
mhm,
Now we're watching it, and today, like, they want to do these perp walks now, where they're going to literally show Bryan Kohberger's flight the entire way back from Pennsylvania, every turn, stop.
mhm.
They stopped to let him go to the bathroom, and they're filming it at the rest stop where he stopped to go to the bathroom. Nobody should have ever known he was there. Do you know what type of risk that puts, not
No,
only
that's
on
actually
him?
that's a really good point that I hadn't even considered. And it's similar with Luigi Mangione, I guess. I mean, but people are
Well,
worshiping Luigi, so he has a little less risk, but
the difference between Luigi Mangione is you also got the mayor there trying to take absolute credit, and he's
yeah.
showcasing his political ways as they're perp walking. And
Yeah.
it's like, come on, man, this is not the rights of the individual you have in custody. You still have to go by
Mhm.
this individual's rights. And literally, you're putting people at risk. Like,
Yeah.
doing what you did, let's just even say Bryan Kohberger, and you're flying it back and you stop at one of these rest stops. One, you could have somebody that wants to take out Bryan Kohberger, and you only have a select amount of people there to protect him.
Mhm.
But two, you could have people that want to free him, and they're going to
Oh,
attack the people
yeah.
escorting him.
Yeah,
And
good
this is
point.
very serious stuff because it happens. Trust
Yeah.
me, it happens.
Yeah,
Whether
he
people
goes into
believe,
the bathroom and a bunch of people they don't know are already in place and they just,
right?
I mean, I've only
Well,
seen it in movies, but I imagine it happens.
and that's what I want to say too. A lot of people would say, "Oh, that's all movie, like
Mhm.
movie theater, theatric." No, it's not. It's
Yeah.
legitimately not. When you're being extradited, they used to put a face mask over me so you
Mhm.
couldn't see who I was. I was
Mhm.
in not only bulletproof vests, my legs were protected. I was
Mhm.
double shackled. I mean, it was, these things are real when you've been through them. When you've
Right.
been there and you've had to ride in these armored, like, tank-like vehicles to get you to
Mhm.
the airport, and
Mhm.
you just look at everybody and go, "Dude, I wrote a couple of bad checks. What's up?" I mean, I'm not the terrorist of the world here. I wrote a couple of bad checks and I I schemed a bank. I'm sorry. I mean,
Oh, you schemed a
I guess,
bank, that was the problem. They
yeah.
can only scheme
The,
us, you
the,
can't scheme them,
well,
AR.
the first time I was being escorted, I was being extradited. It was over $8,500, and they made it seem like I was the $1 trillion federal heist
That's
guy. And I'm like, dude,
unbelievable. They
if I'd
really like
got
to
the
put
amount of
that
money,
that foot on your neck. They really like to put
I'm
that foot
telling
on your
you,
neck, so right up
if I,
front, you know?
yeah, if I'd gotten away with the amount of money you guys are treating me like I'd gotten away from, you guys would not have me right now, because I'd be in some other country laying on the beach drinking Mai Tais with girls I'd never met before and
Yeah,
telling them my name is, some Mexican name, not even an American name. You wouldn't know, but
that's so
that's,
crazy.
we
That's
we can laugh
crazy.
about it, but it's the truth, because now we're watching this happen. And you know Luigi Mangione, and now Bryan Kohberger, and everybody's just kind of put up, on this front page news article that they're the worst of the worst. But prove it. Show me what's
Yeah,
up
I
first
know.
before you go this route. And don't take political acclaim for this, um, until you've actually really legitimately done something worth that political acclaim. Because I don't think Luigi Mangione is the only one that walked up and shot somebody in the back on the street in New York, even
Mhm,
on that day. It's
mhm. Yeah,
just Luigi
exactly right.
Mangione,
That's
could have
exactly right.
possibly shot a big wig of a healthcare system, and now it's the crime of the century.
Mhm.
And I was talking about this the other night with Robert and Kiki over on the live, and
Mhm.
the differences between the Bryan Kohberger case and the Luigi Mangione is the fact they charged him federally in New York, and put the death penalty federally on him, and
Mhm.
whereas in Idaho they've left it in the state court and they've put the death penalty, and
So why do you think the
it's a much
difference?
well, and that was kind of my point, and people need to
Mhm.
open their eyes. What is the difference? Because they're claiming terrorist against Luigi Mangione in New York because he took out a healthcare provider CEO that could change the dynamic of our healthcare system and this and that. So, okay, it affected a circle of people that were pretty prominent and pretty important. But if
Mhm.
you translate that over to the Idaho 4 case, whoever took the lives of these 4 young individuals did it just off of a campus of a major university. I know it's not the biggest university in the world, but this is a major
Yeah.
university. And they were in the midst of purchasing another big online university for mega millions of dollars. This
Mhm.
could very easily be tied into a federal terrorist case as
Right,
well,
like a business
and that's
sabotage or
why I say,
something like that.
yeah, you're affecting a government entity in the facet of you've got a public major university, but it's
Mhm.
founded off of an income. They
Mhm.
are, they make money,
Yeah.
and then all of the kids and all of the different programs. But then you
Mhm.
also got to realize the purchase of the new university at that time could have been highly affected by this. I
But
mean,
it
if
it
anybody
was
had pulled out of that transaction,
and that was tenuous to begin with. That whole interaction was very shady to begin with and tenuous and backdoor things. So it's a really good point you bring up that I hadn't considered, that could be like a form of, if you want to call it terrorism or whatever, because you're attacking their ability to grow and maintain and get a profit and things like that. And there's lots of people, entities, countries, whatever, that might want to do something like that. So,
well, and that was kind of the hang up I had because early on I said this was going to turn into a federal case. This was going to transition into the feds taking this over because they obviously, and we definitely all know it now, they did the investigation, they
mhm,
did the IGG, they did all of this.
yep.
And now we see just how big of a puppet Brett Payne is and how he's getting dumped on because I mean, legitimately, I mean that man had no idea what he was doing. He was the
No,
lead
and he
detective
says he
for
doesn't remember
24 hours.
anything.
Yeah,
He doesn't
so
recall
let's just
anything.
wipe him off of the important scale of things. Like he offers nothing to this
Mhm,
investigation or even into this trial, other than he's going to get up there and make a fool out of the state themselves. He's going to make a fool out of the Moscow Police Department. But his savior at the back end of that is, it's going to become a legal battle over the IGG and the federal stance of things. But at the
mhm,
tail end of this, if this starts to spin sideways in any way, the feds have no time frame that they have to file charges. Where the state only has a certain amount of time, except for this obviously is a death penalty case. So it's a capital case. So you have unlimited time on that.
mhm,
But the
mhm.
feds could step in 22 years from now and file charges against Bryan Kohberger. So he's got such a battle. Like I'm really watching this intently to watch to see when the feds just literally come in and bail the state of Idaho out of this because they're pouring dollar after dollar into this, and you can see them sitting at the prosecutor table, scratching their head, going, "Where do we go from here?" We got
Mhm.
Ashley Jennings legitimately speaking for us. This isn't going so well.
Yes,
We
yeah,
might as well
exactly.
pull let's pull the plug now. I think we may have just lost the entire case, but you know,
So if they
Hitler
step in,
saved.
what would that look like? Like if they decide to take over, what is that gonna look like? Are they just gonna move charges to a federal court? Is that what you're saying? Or I'm not sure.
Well, you always got to remember that the feds have ultimate control whether they go first or they go second. So let's say they do leave it to where Bryan Kohberger is still charged by the state of Idaho, but the feds step in. So the feds could make the decision, we're going to ultimately save you altogether. We're going to take over the entirety of this. You just put
Mm-hmm.
your case on pause. Or
Mm-hmm.
you could even dismiss your charges,
Mm-hmm.
just dismiss them altogether, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
take it all over, because the state of Idaho could later come back in and file capital murder charges again after he's convicted within the federal case.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but that also saves them the hassle, because if Bryan Kohberger was able to go into a federal case and win and be
Mm-hmm.
found not guilty at the federal level, the
Mm-hmm.
state would know it's not even worth it. Like, we can't win. Let's not do this.
Right.
So it's going to be very interesting to see, because the first step that we got to really keep our eyes on is who shows up for this trial to legitimately lay their evidence out for the prosecution side. Are we going to rely on state experts,
Mm-hmm.
or are the feds going to lend the helping hand with major experts? And that's
Mm-hmm.
why the defense brought in Bick and Barlow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the greatest pickup by the defense you can pick up,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
that nullifies all the power within the IgG experts, all the DNA experts, anybody that could testify to the major
Yeah, she's above
talking point.
everybody. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
She's been
she's
doing this
gonna
for a
rate.
long time. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
something else. I mean, I was really excited when I saw that, and I was very impressed with her anyway when she testified, and just I read, like you did, I'm sure read all about her. And you're
yep.
right, like she is it, and you can't really get anybody better than that. The feds aren't getting
Well,
her
and
because
you
she doesn't like what they're doing with the DNA, and I don't either.
right,
So.
and the biggest point of this is she's been around the defense for a very long time. She didn't just step into the realm with the defense.
Right,
She's
right.
been working directly with them, and I could already see how this kind of played out. Is she watched these latest hearings and
Yep.
listened to everything going on within the IgG discussion, and then all of a sudden Hitler says, after a couple of days after saying, I think you just walked yourself into a Franks hearing, he then
Mhm.
all of a sudden comes back and denies everything across the board. And I believe Vic Barlow walked into Ann Taylor's office and said, sign me up. Let's go to
Yeah, I'm
town on
ready
this.
now. I'm ready.
I was going to just be an expert on the stand, but now
Mhm.
I want to cross examine and watch. She's going to be the one that cross examines these individuals from this,
Mhm.
the experts on the other side. And she's going to know more than all of them,
Yeah.
probably all of them combined.
Mhm.
Um, she's going to make them look like fools. She really is. But we also, at the end of the day, have to wonder, what's Hitler going to allow? What is he going to allow to even be asked? And then
Mhm.
what in cross examination? Because you got to always remember the words I object,
Mhm.
sustained,
Mhm.
or overruled.
Mhm.
And we're going to hear a lot of that. Like, that's going to happen every 3 minutes of this case.
It just pisses
Every
me
three.
off because what pisses me off is, and I know it's naive, but like it's. I understand there's laws and all this other stuff, but I've always felt this anyway. That the judges have way too much power and discretion at their hands. They can just say, however they want to go. And most judges are prosecutorial bias. Rarely are you going to have a judge that I feel is objective in any of these trials that I watched. Judge Newman was good in the Murdaugh trial. But for the most part, but like it's this judge, he really pissed me off. At first I thought, oh, he's an intellectual. He likes to get into the case law. This is great. But then I was foolish. I was fooled again, because he comes back and he denies all this stuff. And he just keeps saying, well, his DNA is on the button snap. And it's like, okay, well, let's just talk about that at trial. Because touch DNA, you can get your touch DNA onto something you've never even touched before. That's been proven. They've done studies on this touch DNA, and people want to put all this faith on this touch DNA like it's the be all end all. And the problem is the public isn't educated on it. I recently got educated on it, so I don't blame anyone, but I want to keep talking about it because I think people should know.
Earlier in my years of having to go to court, they didn't have these types of debates back and forth on what was touch, what was this, what was that type of DNA. It was just known as DNA. We got DNA, and then, as a
And you're fucked.
defendant,
And
when
then
you
you're
heard the word,
fucked. If they have
yeah,
DNA, you're fucked.
we,
Is basically what happens,
yeah,
right?
we just knew at that point, it was like, okay, what's the plea bargain on the table? But as I got a little bit deeper into, my years, I got a little bit older, and, my last bit of criminal activity was right around 2009, 2010, and that was actually while I was incarcerated. So a little different story than when you're out on the street. So
Right.
technology has really changed a lot, and their capability of noticing the differences between what's touch, what's real, what's blood, what's this. But I think sadly, judges like Hitler haven't caught up to the new wave of times, because he's more of a medical practice type judge. This is going to be his first capital case. I believe this is his first
Oh, because
capital
he did a
case.
lot of like med mal cases or something as a judge, like
Right. Yeah.
or okay.
Yeah. And trust me, he's been around other cases like the Vallow case and stuff like that, but he wasn't the judge of the case. He was the financial administrator of the case. So that's a
Right.
different ordeal altogether. And look, I've spoken very directly about this judge, that I know he's a by the book. You better know your case law, because he's going to go back there when you file your motions, and he's going to find it, and he's going to expect you to be able to argue it. And
I mean, I think that's a good thing. I'm just going to say, I think that's a good thing. The problem is that when it's biased, it's like he gives a get out of jail free card to the prosecution. I don't think their acumen of legal knowledge is nearly as robust as the defense team. I mean, I just don't see it.
Well, and I think that's where you and I kind of differentiate a little bit. I don't like a judge like this. I do not want a judge like Hitler. And people say, well, he's by the book. He's very, very case knowledgeable. And I say, well, if he's very, very case knowledgeable, that's a problem for me, because he's not willing to look outside of case law to determine what's happening in my case. I don't want you to take my case and go find 3 or 4 other cases that have circumstances within those cases that were argued. Now you're telling me all you care about is the law. I care about my case. I care about what's happening right here. And Judge Hitler showed that in the hearings around the 23rd. And look, I'm not trying to spark debate on conspiracy or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, I don't want to look up to my judge and see that every single one of my motions was declined because he's afraid to change law. You have to step in.
Yeah. That's fair.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
IDG. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you. I understand your passion about this. This makes sense to me because you sat in that chair, and what you're saying. I guess in an ideal world, they would know the case law, but also still be open to the fact that they can make a change here. Like, this is supporting, not supporting. I do like to hear that, but at the same time, the judge still has the decision to make a rule, to make a precedent. In other words, like form precedent. And I feel like none of these judges have the balls to do that. No, I haven't seen a judge. They keep passing the buck. Like, I'm not making the change. I don't want to fuck around with this. They don't want to deal with it. And that sucks, because if I was a judge, I feel like that's what I would do. But I mean, I don't know.
I just, and I implement this into not only the way I try to deliver my content, but like how you and I are talking today, and how we talk with everybody within our community. And that's one thing too. I want to take a moment. We got an amazing community, both you and I. They share very common themes of, innocent until proven guilty. They're very fair-minded. They're great discussionable individuals, to where you can hold the discussion in a respectful manner. And I appreciate that. So, I always love to give a thanks to them for that as well. But I want to think outside of the box. So
Mhm.
my entire life, I was contained in a box, so I had to
Mhm.
learn to think outside of that box. I try to make people laugh with that. Like the
Mhm.
state locked me in a box for years and years and years, so I always had to think outside of that box.
Yeah.
But legitimately, when we watch, let me use an example. Here's a little bit of like an experience of mine, and we'll utilize this to kind of compare what I would want from Hitler if he was my judge in my case, because
Okay.
we are finding that IGG is new and upcoming, and they're utilizing it to solve cases. And it's now at a point in the Idaho 4 that this is a changing moment of whether they're going to lock down these companies for law enforcement usage, or how is this going to move forward.
Yeah.
And Bryan Kohberger's case is going to be the forefront of how this
Yeah,
is
this
going to
is the
change.
biggest
Okay.
case. This is the case. Like, this is a
Right.
quintessential case to test this. This is it. This
Right.
is the test.
So this is the biggie of the biggie right here for this.
Mhm.
So one of my crimes years ago, I developed a way when cell phones were first coming out with banking apps that
Mhm.
you were able to take a picture of your paycheck, your printed paycheck or your hand
Mhm.
rented check, and you
Mhm.
could cash it through the app of your phone into your bank account. Okay? You
Yep.
probably
Yep.
remember when those
Yeah.
days first began.
Yep.
Well, I found a loophole in the law.
Mhm.
I found out that I could cash those checks through the app and then
Mhm.
take them to a secondary bank in person and
Mhm.
cash them again because there was no actual markings on the check itself that I had already cashed it somewhere. All it
Mhm.
had was my signature on the back of the check,
And then
and there
upload it
was
to.
no law.
Mhm.
Right. No law written against that. There was no crime committed cashing that check
Oh my
twice.
god, that's genius. I fucking love it. I wish I knew that. Well, maybe not. I don't wanna get in trouble.
So what I
That's
did is
awesome.
I implemented a way I
Mhm.
was able to create business counts for companies 1 digit off of their actual payroll accounts, and
Mhm.
I could get the bank accounts to loan me the money off the first deposit through the
Mhm.
app
Mhm.
because they would always make a certain amount available.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep,
And I
yep,
would
I
take
remember.
that
Usually
certain
like
amount
half or something.
available. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would that would become available, and I would take it over to my next bank and deposit it in cash so that I could cash another check of a much larger value, and they would cash the whole amount because I was there in person and I had the money in the bank.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now I've got let's just say, and I always kept it under $1,200. I always kept it because I didn't want to set off the alerts at the bank.
Mhm.
Here's a kid with this too big of a check.
Mhm.
So I'd walk out with my $1,200 I got from the check, and then I would immediately withdraw the money out of the bank.
Yep.
Well, when I got arrested, and I
Mhm.
got arrested for forgery and other things like fake IDs, they were
Mhm.
trying to prosecute me on those charges, but they couldn't deem whether they were state or if they were federal because there was no case law
Mhm.
written in on that as of yet because it was so new, they didn't
Right.
know how to prosecute it.
Mhm.
So I actually won that at trial
Oh,
against
that's
all
awesome.
odds in both federal court and
Holy
state court, and I
shit.
actually, instead of getting, like, an unreal amount of years that I would have
Mhm.
gotten, because you gotta remember, I wasn't a first-time criminal at this time either,
Mm,
so it would have
right.
been a habitual offender. I took a plea bargain for less than 2 years for, forgery, and I walked away out of that scheme with over hundreds of thousands of dollars at the end of the day.
That's unbelievable.
The end of the day, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars I walked
So
away with, and I didn't even have to pay restitution on it.
and you're saying that's because of the judge was willing to sort of look beyond, like, wasn't trying to find
W
ways to prosecute
Right.
and recognizing
So
there was no law in the book or anything that they could
that's right.
use, and but doesn't mean he couldn't have done it anyway, because they do it all the time.
Right.
They do it all the time. So you
But
got a
it
fair
was
judge.
I got a fair and partial judge that was willing to say this is a proper argument by the defense. And trust me, I wasn't the genius that came up with the argument. I was
Mhm.
just the kid that came up with the knowledge there was a loophole there. And the way I
Mhm.
did that, and it really sucks, I hate to admit it, but my father was the president of a bank for over 50 years,
Oh,
teaching me
shit.
how to manage my money and how to bank and do all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I took advantage of that. That
Yeah.
sucks to say that, I took advantage of it. I learned everything from credit card checks to, man, I learned so much that I utilized as a criminal that when I was able to get into that courtroom as a defendant, I could whisper to my judge, like, there's no case law on what he's speaking upon right now. You
Mhm.
need to raise the issue, you know, what's the
Mhm.
case law on that? And then the
Right, right.
prosecutor wouldn't have one because there wasn't one. And that's where
Mhm.
we're at right now in the IGG is it's such a flux. It doesn't fit into the DNA type case law, but it
Mhm.
doesn't fit into, other investigative measure case law as of yet either, because exactly what Hitler said, this is not a criminal or even a civil issue done by the FBI, even though they broke their own procedure, they didn't
Mhm.
break other procedure or law. Well, he's right. But
Yeah.
you still have to look outside the box and understand what they did was cheating the system,
Mhm.
and they're not even providing the resource documents to prove how they did it. And
Mhm.
that's pretty scary. At least in my case, the prosecution
Mhm.
could bring in, they could say, well, look, Your Honor, he cashed the check via this app and then he went back in and
Yeah,
cashed
but
it at the
tell me where
bank.
the law says he can't, right? He didn't
Right.
know. Maybe
And
he thought that's,
that was the
like,
whole thing. Yep.
well, no, this
That was the whole
IGG
thing.
thing, is very important to me. I mean, I'm very interested in the outcome of it, and I'm interested because, you know, in an ideal world, for example, the way the Delphi judge operated was like horrific, right? And we saw how, I mean, I'm sure there's worse cases, but that's the worst one I know of, right? And I feel like in the Karen Reed case too, if we had an impartial judge, it would simply be case dismissed. Like, there's so many people who have talked about how she shouldn't even be charged, and at this point it should be dismissed. It's not going to happen. And the same thing here. This IGG is a huge issue, and like we just said, this is like the the perfect test case for it. And sometimes I think like it's too perfect. Like, you couldn't have set it up better to be more perfect, because he doesn't really have, I know they say circumstantial, the car, the phone, but he really doesn't have anything. They really don't have anything else. If they didn't have this IGG, they're full of shit that they could prosecute this case and expect to win. That's my opinion. But maybe in Moscow, like in Lata, but not, hopefully not in Ada. But yeah, the judge is not being brave. He's not considering that this should not be allowed in, because it doesn't meet any rules for evidence, in the sense, like, has it been tested? Is it peer reviewed? Are people, other people saying this is okay? It's all up in the air right now, right? It's all up in the air.
Yeah, and that's what the scary part of this is, and I get it how important every part of this is. The IGG is going to be massive, not only today in this case, but moving forward. How are we going to figure this out? How are we going to put all this together? If it is going to be utilized in the future, we need to get case law written in of how, why, when,
Yep.
it's obvious right now. I mean, Brett Payne made this statement right there on the stand in court under oath. They got to Bryan Kohberger through the IGG process. That's the first they heard of his name, not based off of the FBI calling back all these results, but the FBI called back a tip that clearly stated Bryan Kohberger's name as a person of interest in this case. But I think most of us with common sense can put two and two together and understand the FBI was working the IGG. They
Hmm.
got the results that they were looking for, and they called in a tip and said, go get this guy. And the reason why they did that is because it puts no, uh, I guess, weight of the burden onto the state. Now, Moscow Police Department, none of them could be pointed at like, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, because you got to remember, Hitler is a judge in the Idaho court system. He cannot punish the FBI for what the FBI did, but he could certainly punish the Idaho law enforcement agencies if
Yes,
they went out of their
but he won't.
spectrum of what they're
Right.
allowed to
But
do.
he won't because he's a
So he's
pussy. Sorry, he's a pussy. I can't stand it. It's
well,
like
I mean,
where, you know, you think he shouldn't or
I think one thing that well, he's scared. Like
yeah,
he
fair
he
enough.
knows that
Fair enough.
okay, the Idaho Supreme Court appointed him to have full control of this case. They put him in full control, and he knows that. He's full in
Mhm,
control. There's nobody that supersedes what he does in the
mhm,
state of Idaho outside of the Supreme Court. So you've got
mhm,
levels. You got the Idaho Supreme Court, and then you
mhm.
got the federal Supreme Court.
Yeah,
So where this is going to end up very soon is the federal Supreme Court.
yeah.
Whether this is a guilty or a not guilty or a dismissal, this is going to end up in the federal Supreme Court, all based upon the IGG and the usage of the IGG by the FBI. I mean, it's going to become a whirlwind. And look, I'm not against IGG being used to
Mhm.
solve criminal
Yeah, me
cases.
neither. Just people need to be informed and consent to it, and then don't go into the place where people said they don't want it used. I'm the same way as you. Just people need to make it that choice fully informed. If you want to be a genetic
Or,
witness and snitch on your ancestors, go for it. But I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? That's the way I feel.
well, I think at the end of the day, the way it's going to come is you're not going to have that choice. It's going to
Yeah.
become
Oh,
we utilize this for purposes of investigative crime, and that's
that's what
fine.
I'm
If you
terrified of.
let people know that up, if you let people know up front, we don't care whether you like it or not. This is what it's going to be used for. At least we know. At least we
Right. And then
know.
they won't,
People like
perhaps they won't donate, they won't put their DNA in the system because, unfortunately I did this DNA test on ancestry.com years ago before my I'll say my third eye opened, put it that way. I was way too naive in the world. And, unfortunately, I can't change that now. Now I can delete it. I can delete it or whatever, but do I really think it got deleted? Probably not. I did opt out of Ellie. I did opt out of research purposes. Did I really believe that? Not really, but I did check that box. I did look there and I will
well,
sue
then let me
somebody.
ask you. Let me ask you at this point. You've
Mhm.
marked that, and now you've just seen the FBI enter two databases they weren't allowed to.
Yeah. Hmm.
What makes you feel as though your database won't be next?
You're 100% right. I
You
agree
know?
with you. All I know is if they knock on my door, I'm suing them for my Fourth Amendment violation because they had no fucking business looking at my DNA when I clearly checked that off. You know what I mean? So
I just
it
wonder
really
if
is.
people that are in those systems that now hear about this through the Idaho 4 case, are they gonna come out and sue? They have every right to do that, but their
I'd love
civil
to start a
suit
class action lawsuit. Who's with me? I mean, let's go. That's
right.
the way I feel about it. It's bullshit.
But I think the civil suit would be directed at the IGT testing facilities and not the feds, and I think the feds should be the one that actually gets
Yes,
sued, but it would be
100%
the
the feds.
IGG testing facilities because they are the ones that control who can and who can't and why and how. They
And if
have the
loopholes
sample
exist, they could say,
themselves and
yeah.
the results.
Like
Right.
Vargas was
So
talking
it
about the loopholes. They're going to put that on you. You should have fixed that loophole because this is sensitive data. It's not our fault that the
right.
FBI figured out how to use a loophole. It's your fault, Othram or whoever, or Ancestry or whatever. But no, I agree with you. It
Right.
should be the federal government that gets sued for that shit.
And it sucks for people like me. I'm in a different scenario. I was adopted, and if I wanted to utilize those services to find my biological family, which thankfully I already did in different routes anyway. We didn't have to go
Mhm,
through those, but I know part of my family did put their DNA into those.
mhm.
I didn't. See, I put my DNA into the federal database of inmates. So I don't really
Totally.
need to have my DNA. It doesn't matter where my DNA is because
Yeah.
I'm in the ultimate database of,
Right,
hey, by the
right.
way, we don't give a damn if you care if we look for this or not. You have no rights to it
We
anymore.
own your
So,
DNA. I mean, that's,
right,
we've kind of talked about this before, but the way people are treated in prison and then when they get out of prison is just so, it bothers me a lot. I'll just say that. And it's because, is it because I have relatives? Sure. But it's also because I feel like it's a lot, people are capable of a lot of things they don't realize they're capable of. I really believe that, I believe that about myself. I like to think I wouldn't do an
right.
X, Y, and Z, but I don't really know, depending on the situation I'm in, what might happen. So,
But I'm kind of scared too now with this coming out and we're seeing all this happening. Can you imagine what my family would endure if my DNA's found at different scenes and they utilize the IgG process to narrow it down? And I've got 6 siblings. So it's going to come directly to them probably before it gets to, I mean,
mhm,
if I wasn't in that database of the good old inmate, university
mhm.
class of 90,
Right,
whatever.
right.
But, I mean, it's like, uh, this is going to affect people outside of just the perpetrators of crimes. And that's why, I mean, you have to look at it too. And I think many have talked about, they presented the idea of 4 brothers with this DNA connection prior to wherever it
Right.
led from there. So of
Mhm,
course, all the speculation things are flowing. Where could these 4 brothers be? What could these 4 brothers be? But think of how they felt when someone knocked on their door and they potentially aren't anywhere near this crime scene or the state it was committed in. And a cop says, "Hey, by the way, we want to get your DNA. We're trying to
mhm,
match it up to a murder scene in Idaho." And they're looking at him going, "No, I don't think
mhm,
so, because if you're at my door, that means you cheated the system to even get to my door.
mhm.
So why would I give you my DNA to help you get to the system of the
Yeah,
next
I don't
person's
blame
door?"
them for telling them to screw off because that's exactly what I would have told them to do. I'm just telling you right now. If, like I said, if they knocked on my door and was like, "Oh, we did," you know what? I talked to my lawyer. I got nothing to say. Why would you? You're just putting yourself in harm's way. You're going to get arrested. Like,
So I do have to make you laugh for a minute because I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, an investigator showed up at the door with Jen and I, and Jen answered the door. And they said, "Hey, we're just here. We just need to collect a DNA sample from Mr. Hayes. We need to compare it to these other samples that we have to try to negate him from being involved in the crime scene." And my wife's like, "I don't think he's going to do that for you. Like, you should already know you're
right.
knocking on the door. You know his background. You already know
Yeah.
why you're at the door." Well, I
Mhm.
came out and I was just kind of chuckling because I had heard the conversation. I came out of the room. I said, "No problem, man. I'll give you a DNA sample. You've already got blood. You've already got teeth. You've already got whatever you
Right,
want.
right,
But
right.
I'll give you, if you want a DNA sample, what do you want?" He goes, "Can I do a cheek swab?" I said, "As long as I could do it myself, I'll give you a DNA sample." And he
Yeah.
says, "All right, cool." Well, I went into the bathroom and I peed in a cup and I rubbed the thing in the pee and I brought it back out to him and he could smell it. And he's like, "Man, this is the worst. What are you thinking?" I said, "Well, come on, man. Really? Are you serious? You know my background. You know I'm in all the databases
That's
already,
awesome. Right, right.
and
You
I
think I'm
got
an
to make you
idiot over
laugh a
here?
little bit. Right. Here you are showing up, and at the
Here's a
time, I
cup of
think Jen and
piss
I
for
were,
you for your trouble.
yeah, we had moved out of our home. We sold our home in Arizona, and we were just kind of doing the on the move thing. We're
Mhm.
traveling and just enjoying life a little bit. And I did something so stupid like that, not thinking in the back of my head that they could actually arrest me for that because
Yeah.
that's like hazardous stuff. And but he laughed it off, so he was cool about it. And I ended up, I went ahead and I did the swab for him after that
Mhm.
because he did take it like a champ, and I'm like
Yeah, yeah,
holding a
you're like,
cup of pee in
all
my
right,
hand.
that's fine. Yeah.
Here I am. I look like, and Jen's looking at me, shaking her head, going, "I told you, you got to straighten your life out. Why, what are you doing?" I'm
Right.
like, "You're right. I got to try to be better about this." But and that's the thing. This is going to be case law changing. It's
Mhm.
just not going to be case law changing with Hitler at the helm of that. And that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
concerns
He's
me
not
when
doing
we
it.
get in. Yeah, when we get into this trial, he's going to allow a lot of prosecutors questions and
Mhm.
not as many defense questions and rebuttal questions. I think that things are going to get narrowed down pretty quick.
So what's interesting is Idaho Republican and conservative or Democrat? I don't, and liberal. I don't know.
I have no idea. I mean, they're just Idaho people to me.
No, I guess what I'm asking, I guess what I'm wondering is who did they like, you know how it'll usually say like this state was mostly Trump leaning or whatever. I'm just curious. My guess is they're mostly conservative. I could be wrong. The only reason
I
why,
think they are.
yeah, I mean, just because I feel like they're really into Second Amendments and stuff, free speech and stuff. I know Moscow itself is a liberal
Mhm.
town, but that's because it's a university town. That's every university, unfortunately. But the reason why I ask and the reason why I
Yeah.
think it could help is during the trial, people who are big advocates of, say, the Second Amendment or more rightward leaning tend to be more interested in the civil rights of an individual and the rights that we all have as Americans. And that, in my opinion, could be helpful for this case because if people really get beyond the fact that touching, if they understand it's just a couple of skin cells, and then if they understand how we got here, are they going to want their relatives to be treated that way? I don't think so. But like you're saying, the judge might not allow some of those questions in.
Yeah, and many are saying it's a red state and that Boise's mixed. I just, from what I remember when I was in Idaho, it amazing people. Like it was an amazing community. The people that we got to know. My wife lived there for a couple of years when she was
Mhm.
younger, and then of course, I made my way through. I thought I was going to go to college in Pullman, and then hey, look at that, me and Brian, we move
Crazy.
across the country to go to Pullman and just be
That's
criminals. But
crazy.
um, you know, uh, when we would venture over, see, when we in Pullman, it was party town, and when
Mhm.
we go over to Moscow, it was more community based. Like everybody got along better in Moscow than we did in Pullman.
Mhm.
And it was more of a bounce around atmosphere. Like you could go to one bar and then bounce over to a friend's house and to another bar, and everybody just kind of knew each other, and it was pretty cool. But when you get down into the Boise area, it does shift a little bit compared to the rest of the state, just because, I mean, I guess it's more of the city than, other places
Okay.
are. So the
Yeah.
community is a little bit different. It's still great people. It's great businesses. And I enjoyed my time there. I really did. Like
Mhm.
it was slower pace than really what I was used to. Like it's a
Mhm.
slower paced place, and people were friendly, and I didn't feel like crime really was an issue. And
Mhm.
I think that people stood for each other and took care of each other. Now, obviously, I didn't know the whole dynamic of the whole area, but
Mhm.
boy, that changes when you get into the penitentiary setting up there. It's a little bit
Right.
different, but
Yeah.
uh, and I think that something like this that hits a community like that, I'm still kind of shaking my head of why you moved this out of Latah County and you moved it over. I know they didn't choose Ada County, but they
Mhm.
had to know Ada County was going to be on that map of places this could possibly go.
Mhm.
And I just don't. I said it then, and
Mhm.
I say it again now. I said it back then that I feel like Kohberger's going to regret changing a venue.
Mhm.
And today I feel like he regrets changing the venue, and I think Ann Taylor might as well.
You think
They
if he
got the
stayed
short
with
end of the
John
stick.
Judge, you think John Judge would have been a better option? Is that what you're saying? Or just the location?
Well, one, the location, I think he would have had a better setting being in the jail there in Latah County than what he's in now in Ada. I
Mhm.
think where he's at now in Ada is it hits your mind a lot harder, and
Mhm.
it causes more stress than what you would endure in a little jail like Latah County. I was never fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in jails like Latah County, but I sure prayed I could get to one. Like, let me have that,
Right.
but Ada County is far more stressful. There's a lot more politics within the jail.
Okay.
There's more aggression. And when I say aggression, I don't ultimately mean that there's more like violence. It's
Mhm.
just aggressiveness across the board, even by the people that work at the jail, the
Yeah.
staff itself, because they got more people to deal with, so they're on more stressful, frustrated measure on a daily basis. But
Mhm.
when a nurse only has to come see you in the
Mhm.
basement of the jail,
Mhm.
compared to
Right.
when she's got to serve medication to 500 people in less than an hour and a half,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
big
No, I
difference.
get it. Yeah. No, that actually makes sense. But so
As
what about,
for
do you think, oh, sorry, go ahead. John Judge, is that, yeah, that's what I want to know. Go ahead.
Yeah, as for John's judge, I think Ann Taylor would have already worked this up into the Supreme Court
Mhm.
section that would have overruled a lot of things John Judge could have ruled upon.
Okay.
I think she threw out that kind of edge and that opportunity when she did the change of venue, because now this is deemed by the Idaho Supreme Court. They made this decision and they picked this judge. So for Ann
Interesting.
Taylor to go back to their doorstep now and say, "Hey, we want you to open your eyes again to this, this, and this,"
Yeah.
because that's literally where this could go, based upon all the denials and
Mhm.
everything that just transpired in regards to the Franks hearing. This
Mhm.
could legitimately have Ann Taylor right now knocking on the door again of the
Mhm.
Idaho Supreme Court to
Mhm.
get this reviewed and to see if they would overrule Hitler on some of
Mhm.
these things.
Mhm.
I just don't think that doors is open for her
Yeah.
now, um, because first she has to get permission from Hitler to do that.
Right.
And, that's not the easiest thing to do. Like, "Hey,
Yeah.
judge, I
No.
know you just you listened to everything we had to say, you opened up your ears for us to hold all these hearings that normally are not held, but you did
Mhm.
it, and then you're willing to, kinda work with us and unseal some things, but we really wanna go above your head because we think all your decisions were stupid, and we really just wanna move on from you and see if we can
Mhm.
get you overruled."
Yeah.
Um, does anybody want to see Judge Gold number 2 from Delphi back into the courtroom
Yeah.
in Idaho? Because if that's what were to happen here, look at how
Mhm.
Judge Gold took that overruling by that, Supreme Court, when she made a decision and they overruled it, which was a substantial decision that they overruled,
Mhm.
removing his counsel.
Yeah. And it was
Um,
sickening to, it's sickening. In my opinion, it should be, you should recuse the judge at that point. I mean, how can you expect them to be fair and unbiased? But that's in a perfect world and it's never going to happen.
Well,
So,
and I didn't cover that case a ton, but
mhm.
that's what I was screaming the entire time I'm watching this is how do you leave a judge that literally has been overruled and butthurt in charge
Mhm.
of a man's life and his case? Because
Yep.
from that point on, she never listened to another word the defense even presented. She blacked it all out. She disregarded,
You'd
defense
like to think,
strategies.
I'd like to think judges were above that. They were above being like chapped over the fact that somebody said, "Hey, you're wrong here." I like to think that they're like in Plato's time where they're like these philosophers and they actually give a shit about what's right and wrong and the truth, but they're just not, they're just not.
Unfortunately, they're human too.
Yeah.
They've got to walk through society just the same as each one of us have to do, and they've got the stresses of life. They got to go home to their home lives. Everything that you're actually seeing happen within the courtroom is not the entirety of their daily lives.
Yeah.
And I think that, of course, when I'm sitting in there as a defendant, I don't give a darn what your
Well,
daily
that's what
life judge is
honestly,
like,
AR, that's what
but
I'm gonna say this. I understand what you're saying. I appreciate it because I always try to be empathetic, but I feel differently in a way because here's the thing. It's the same thing as if you're gonna be like a doctor or a surgeon or whatever. you have a life at home, you got your problem stuff, but when you're in the ER and somebody comes in, you can't be fucking around because that's somebody's life. And I feel the same way in this instance. I don't care if you got all this other shit going on. If you're a judge, I expect you to have a certain level of integrity, and none of these people seem to have it, and that's very disappointing to me.
I can agree with you on that, but I also look at it this way based upon your projection, just the way you put it. A
Mhm.
doctor gets to come to work and save lives. That's a positive nature. To get away from a negative setting at home, he can come make a difference in a manner he's saving lives.
Sure,
A
sure.
judge is a judge is going to work to see how many lives he's going to actually take away.
Yeah. No,
It's not
it's fair.
always
It's
the
a fair point.
easiest mentality, but you would think also, you would think that at the end of the day, that's why they would want to be more fair. But then if
Yeah.
they are more fair, if they are more open-minded, then they get hit from the other side of the individuals that elected them for the strength of the way they uphold the law. And if they're seen as somebody that's willing to bend that or curve that in the manner of a criminal, they
Yeah.
might not be elected again. You know, I mean
Yeah.
that's the hard part of this, and I don't think that's a fair thing to say. You know, when you're looking at the justification of why Bryan Kohberger should or shouldn't get a fair trial, he
Right. I
absolutely should get a
understand.
fair trial.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the best way to iron this out, and I'd be one of the very first people to really jump on board if they ever did a 3-judge panel on every single case. Each decision of importance has to go through a panel of 3 judges, and it's got to be a unanimous 3-1 decision on
Mhm.
every big thing. Like you
Mhm.
go back there, just like a jury of our peers decides our guilt based upon
Mhm.
the evidence. Well,
Mhm.
you should base your decision on my motions. Because
Mhm.
remember, this is a death penalty case. You better damn well have 3 minds working on a death penalty case. This
Mhm.
isn't
Mhm.
you're going away for 1 year for forging a check. This is you're
Right.
never coming home and your family's going to be, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. You
saying their
can't get more
farewells. You know,
serious.
I
Yeah.
mean, so it's you need a 3 panel judge that reviews every single big decision, and I think that protects from, well, I'm just not confident enough to make this decision. Well, there's 3 of us here, so if there's an
Yeah.
issue with the decision we make, that you
Yeah.
will go before the Supreme Court at that point, and we could all discuss our feelings of how we came to this. And I think there's more
Mhm.
power in that.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a fair point. It would sort of accelerate the process in a sense because with the 3 judges, it's like a mini appellate court almost. Like you don't just have one judge making the decision, you have 3 minds there. And so even though it might create a little more time or work initially, it could save time over the length of the years of the case because all these cases end up just going on and on, it seems like. And
I feel as though it would cut down the length of how long these things take to get
mhm,
to a trial, because you got to realize the reasoning why this takes so long is the fight over case law and the different
mhm,
things to get the if you have a panel of judges up there,
mhm.
you could handle more in one setting and they could force speed things. Like, look, guys, you shouldn't even have brought charges against this individual if you didn't have all of your ducks in a row when it came to discovery. Like, we
Mhm,
understand that more and more evidence comes in through time, but you
mhm.
literally filed these charges in less than a month against this individual, and you don't even have the CAS report back.
Yeah, I mean, it
So we
was
kind
if
of
they
need
hadn't waived speedy trial, sorry, I just had to say that the speedy trial thing still really hurts my heart when I think about it. But anyway, yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
no, and that's another thing too, is I think a panel could help protect that right as well, because the
Yeah.
speedy trial is important. I feel like I have someone drilling on my roof right now. It's ridiculous. But at first, I thought it was my dogs tooting in the
Someone's gonna
background, and
drop
now
behind you in a second, like Tom Cruise
I'm
style.
like, are you guys trying to join me on my live, or what's going on here? I do have a front door, but um, you know, a lot of these debates, or the judge has to take time to make a ruling. So he takes, I've had judges take weeks to make a ruling
Yeah.
on a couple of motions that we felt like were pretty simple motions,
Hmm.
but because they got to dig for the case law and they got to try to figure these things out and plan it around their schedules. If you have a panel of 3, if 2 are busy, you still got one that could go find the case law, bring that back, and then they have a meeting later in the afternoon and they can all talk about it. So,
It's actually a great
um,
idea, even if they weren't able to make it like, because it would, I'm guessing you would do it on a state by state basis. Maybe, I'm not sure, but even if they couldn't like get it structured that way, if they just had like time for the judges to like 3 judges to meet, like, and review different, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's a good idea though. I like it. I feel like it would
well, and
help a lot,
that's, I
strengthen
mean, I
numbers.
hate to tell you, like, I've watched the wasting of time that
Hmm.
happens. So I've sat in the courtroom in Arizona for 8 hours, 3 days straight,
Hmm.
and the judge was in and out of his chambers just trying to get paperwork or information or this or that. And literally, we didn't even make it through the motion in 3 days because he had to
Oh,
go track stuff down. And it's like, man, how
that's
long is my
inefficient.
trial going to take?
Yeah, that's
If
so,
it's 3 days for you to find that, and this is
yeah.
why they get frustrated. And then they just start shuffling people through and not hearing things. Judge Hippler
Oh,
did not listen to that January 23rd hearing all the way through. He made his
yeah.
decision based off of just little guts and feelings. He
Hmm.
determined that while that was happening, and we all watched it when he said,
Yeah.
"Well, your client shouldn't have left his DNA at the crime scene."
Yeah, exactly.
Your
Yep.
Honor, that's not what I'm arguing with you. That's not
Yeah.
even my argument. Why are you
Yeah.
missing my complete argument? But then I also had to go back and realize he did force the defense to narrow their proffer from
Mhm.
2,000 pages to just over 1,000. And then he punished them because they didn't have the proper exhibits or the proper information that he was expecting in there, which most likely was in there, but they had to redact that out of it to make it to his page limit. And it's like,
Right.
if you had 3 judges that were willing, they could have broke that 3 ways. They could have all read 600 pages and figured this out, and it would have been okay. Or if Judge Hippler missed something, one of
Mhm.
the other 2 could have said, "Oh, but did you know?" and blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and you talk it out. And in a 30-minute conversation, you can make a formulated, educated decision compared to one person spending a week trying to figure it out.
No, I mean, it's a good point, and you're breaking it down for me in the sense of like it's like any other job, right? Like shit's not efficient. I'm frustrated. I'm just gonna cut this corner or not worry about that. Only you're dealing with somebody's life, and all those details matter, and you don't know which one it's going to be, and you don't have time to read through it. And so, it's easy for me to get righteous about it and say, "But you're a judge." But like, I'm not a judge, and if I have 20 cases and whatever and all this other shit going on, it does make it really difficult.
Well, and think of it on the other side of the spectrum. Like I always said, you got to think outside the box too. The victims'
Mhm.
families are enduring this stuff too. They're
Yeah, no,
waiting and they're waiting and they're stressed out, waiting to hear what the results of these motions are going to be, and then they're trying to figure out where do they need to be for what. And
mhm.
it really sucks when everybody travels to go to a court hearing, and all of a sudden that court hearing's either closed or canceled
Yeah,
and you
no,
didn't know
that
it till the day
sucks.
before.
Yeah,
I mean,
and like
it's
as a
like
victim, if you're a family member of a victim, I feel like they should. Don't they have the liaison there to communicate with you? Like, I guess they don't. I don't know.
well, if you think that they do their job in the most timely or correct manner. I mean,
Yeah,
unfortunately, nobody helped my wife ever. My wife
yeah.
had to do it all on her own, even though we did have people there to try and help.
Hmm.
Um, they're overworked too. They're overwhelmed
Yeah.
as well. So I mean, this is across the board. Like me, my wife and I are going to Boise for the 9th and
Hmm.
the 10th for the
Hmm.
hearings that are there for the limine hearing.
Woohoo! That's
And
exciting. That's so
yeah, we're
exciting.
we're going to be boots on the ground. We're going to have a good time doing that, whether they do the hearings or not. We're going to be there
Yeah.
because I've already told her
Yeah.
I'm not going to even think in my mind that they're going to cancel these or they're going to close it. I got to be there anyway. I got to get the feel for it. She's like, well, Albert, you've already been in that jail before. I mean, don't you already have the feel for it? And I'm like, well, let's try it again.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to go up there just so I can get a little bit better of a sense of what's it like in and around. Like, we can talk about it from afar. I
Mhm.
want to go stand on the steps of that courtroom and just feel what it feels like.
Yeah.
Not for me, not for like, here I am I want to feel what it's like for everybody in the community.
Mhm.
Is the community when you go to McDonald's talking about this case? Is the community
Mhm.
at your local library talking about this case? And how packed are the steps of this courthouse going to be? I know the trial is going to be just unreal. I mean, it's unreal. And I've already got, my setup for the trial already confirmed and set up. So I'm excited about that. I'm not going to be fighting to see if I can get a hotel room or anything of that
Oh,
nature.
that's
We're
awesome.
set
That's
up
so
for it. Yeah.
cool.
So we're already set up for that.
Mhm.
So maybe we're not going to be there all 3 months, but we have a setup for it where I can come and go as necessary. So if I'm there for a
Mhm.
week and leave for a week and come back, I got the same place that
That's
allows my
awesome.
dogs.
Mhm.
So the doggies will be broadcasting from the front doorsteps of the Ada County Courthouse in the Bryan Kohberger trial.
That's so cool. No, I mean, it is different. I recently went to Canton. We were talking about Canton, Massachusetts, the home of police officer John O'Keefe. And it was just, you really do get a vibe, if you're that kind of person, like you just get a sense just standing there, being there. And so, yeah, it's really important to do those things if you can. So that's exciting
And
news.
could you imagine how cool this is gonna be? I'm gonna be standing on the front doorstep of this massive trial with cameras everywhere, wearing a hat saying "a convict's thoughts."
That's going to be awesome.
I'm gonna
I
get
hope a news
I'm gonna
station
get some
interviews you.
T-shirts.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope a news
Yeah.
station interviews you. Be like, yep, I'm a convict's thoughts, because it's a good
Well, I just gotta
perspective.
figure people are gonna show up probably wearing their pro Kohberger shirts, some with
Hmm.
the negative Kohberger shirts, and I'm gonna show up with I'm in a convict with my
Right,
jailhouse.
right,
Here I
right.
am to share my thoughts.
Yep,
We're here to talk about the justice system from a convict's thoughts point of view, and
yeah. No, it's
it
going
should
to
be
be
fun. It should
awesome.
be fun. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm starting. I after like an hour or so. How we've been going for a little while, huh? I don't
I
even
think
know
so.
how
I
long.
don't even know. I think an hour
Oh,
and
it's a
20
little over an
minutes.
hour.
I
Okay.
think.
I'm gonna take a look over here
Yeah.
at my chat for a second because I've ignored them and I
Yeah,
feel
do
bad.
that.
Hey
I have
guys,
too. I feel bad too.
I'm just gonna say hello. There's Christy
See if we have any
Nevada.
questions
Hello.
in there.
Robert, Leslie, Kane.
God, I just had these people going to town on my roof. It's like construction city. I hope they're building me a new penthouse up there or something. It's like, get me a new jacuzzi tub, please.
Oh my God. Thank you,
Just
Cottonwood.
don't raise my rent. I can't afford any more than I pay now. I don't know if that. I know people have been asking questions, and I apologize if I missed those. It's always so fun because post woke, when you and I get into a conversation, it's just so interesting because we don't do it enough. We don't get the opportunity to talk as much as we should. But
Yeah.
you've got people involved in your channel like Les and
Mhm.
some just amazing people that I get the opportunity to speak with, not a lot, but sometimes, and
Mhm.
I just enjoy it so much. So venturing over here is always fun. Always, always
Yeah,
fun.
no, I definitely want to do this again. And I would love to talk about, we can even do a Karen Reed episode because I would love to hear your thoughts on some of that. And you could just ask me whatever that you don't know about it, and then we could talk. Was that's that case? I think you would also have some really good insight on that I haven't heard from anybody else, because so it's a wild case. But yeah, I agree. These are good lives, and
I always love it when people summon a convict to talk about crime. I could bring a little bit of knowledge.
Listen, I'm gonna summon you. I'm gonna summon you.
Let's just be careful about how in depth into my crime I get, because every day my wife, we actually joke about it every once in a while. She'll come at me at the dinner table and be like, "Do you know if you have any cases out there right now that don't have any like length of how long they could prosecute you for? Like they could
Oh my
still get you
god.
today?" And I'm like, "Well, let me think about what I've done through the years." And um, AR, who do you think will be at the trial and what will the first month look like? So, obviously, the beginning of the trial is always the jury selection process. And that's straight craziness because you get to see right off the bat um, exactly what type of juror each side wants. And let me tell you, it's a big discussion between defense attorney and defendant prior to the trial. You sit down for days and talk about it in bigger cases. What type of juror are we looking for? How are we going to portray this? Whether, I'm taking the stand, not taking the stand, that's going to determine what type of juror we're looking for. So right now, as everybody knows, we're looking at the filings about the autistic and the different the mental and the different things that they're going to try to
Mhm.
present. And guys, this is a ploy to try to dictate the jury pool. Okay, this isn't trying
Oh.
to get a plea bargain or anything of that nature. We, as a defendant, we need the best selection of jury that we can possibly get for the type of case we want to put on. So the very most important thing right now that they have to focus on going into these motions that they're filing and moving forward towards that jury selection is now we got to get death penalty nullified. So their efforts right now are all driven to that death penalty, death penalty, death penalty. You got to get that nullified. You got to get that negated because that changes the jury draw. I don't know if people really know the difference between a death penalty jury and a common jury.
Well,
Death
I would
penalty
think.
jury. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Let me give you an idea of what I think it is, and then you can tell me what it is. So in my mind, a death penalty jury, first of all, you have to make sure all those people are willing to put someone to death if they find the person guilty, versus the non-death penalty. You don't have to worry about that. At least for me, that's one piece, right? I mean, I would think.
Right. Yep. So that's one thing that I have to introduce is your willingness that if you found somebody guilty, that their life would be taken from them at the
Mhm,
end of the day. Like
mhm,
um, in a death penalty case, the percentages of the jury finding the defendant guilty is
mhm.
extremely high, and
Really?
then it's almost a guarantee that you get the death penalty. So
Yeah.
from what people told me, because I mean, I have buddies right now on death row in Arizona that I've been through their cases with them and watched what happened with them. But, I've done research into it, not because I was ever going to face it, but because,
Mhm,
it's interesting to know.
mhm.
It's in the high 90 percentages of conviction rate of a guilty verdict because when people are summoned for a death penalty jury, they pretty much already deem the person guilty. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been charged with death penalty charges. Um,
Wow.
so they take into the consideration that the prosecution filed for the death penalty because the case is warranted of death penalty. So that's already in their mind. But now their decision at the end of the day is pretty simple. If we find this guy guilty, he's being put to death. We're not going to give him anything other than that. And that's exactly why right now it's Ann Taylor and Massott's job with Nick Barlow to get everything removed from this case that could tie into a death penalty. And that's why mitigating circumstances are huge. And that's right now, it's the fight between the defense and the prosecution on those mitigating circumstances that are going to be able to be spoken of in the trial. But see, there's a difference because mitigating circumstances still, no matter what, go into the file to the judge,
Mhm.
that he's going to determine whether you got aggravating factors or mitigating factors. So that all stays there. But for what's going to be said in front of a jury, and it makes a difference. It
Wow.
makes a huge
Okay.
difference,
Oh, okay.
especially,
That's the part I wasn't aware of. That's interesting.
yeah,
That's actually really
especially when you
interesting.
go in front of a death penalty jury, or even in a large federal jury like I've been in front of. You've got to be able to make a point as if they do find you guilty,
Mhm.
they could see some reasoning as to why you could have done what you did outside of just being a criminal person. There was
Yeah.
something that tied into you gradually getting to that point,
Mhm.
and that this is a part, and this is where a lot of people mistake when they speak about this.
Mhm.
This is not something that they choose to do. This is
Mhm.
mandated to do what they're doing. And Taylor has to fight the death penalty. It's
Oh,
mandated. She
yeah.
has to do it. She
Yeah.
can't choose to not do it. She
Mhm.
has
Yeah.
to do this. So
'Cause
all of
it'd
this
be
is being
ineffective.
presented.
It's like ineffective counsel or something, right? If she, because she's a
Yeah,
death
absolutely.
penalty certified lawyer, so that's why you have to be certified or whatever in it, right? Because there are these
Right.
extra things that you have to do, or you could be considered unethical or something, I'm guessing.
Well, also, this judge, when he gets the entire file of this and it's time to get on with the trial, and he's going to look through this file to make sure each step, each box is checked.
Mhm.
Because if he allows this to move forward without actually having those check marks,
Mhm.
it puts the entire case at risk. Now it could literally be a mistrial. It can be deemed a
Right.
mistrial. That's the last thing in this that anybody wants or needs is a mistrial.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is devastating to this situation
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
Robert will be on edge. Not Robert. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about my partner in crime over there. But um, yeah, Brian's gonna be on edge at all times that they could refile charges at any point in time. Look
Mhm.
at Karen Reed. She's still battling because
Yep.
she got, yeah, a dismissal. She got a mistrial instead of a not guilty verdict. And
Yeah.
she's, I mean, it's such a pain. So both sides just want to work through this. Every box needs to be checked, but the prosecution definitely wants to make sure, and that's why these motions were filed. When we get to trial, we don't want the sorry, pitiful, this is the mental aptitude of this individual. We don't
Mhm.
want witness after witness taking the stand about Brian's struggles with this or that. They want to
Mhm.
keep it direct to the evidence and direct to the experts. And then the defense is going to try to bring in reasonable doubt from all different angles. And
Mhm.
it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's unfair of them to not allow somebody to present. I mean, you're asking people to be directly sort of sympathetic, or if not empathetic, to the defendant, and humanize the person that's really been dehumanized since they got arrested, as far as I can see. And so I can't even imagine that feeling. If you're innocent and this is how you were arrested and all these other things. And one of the other things I've heard a couple of times, and I don't know if you've heard this or have thoughts on it, but when I was reading over Bicca Barlow's initial, affidavit when she first testified, she was saying how the way that this was done and the way that these types of investigations are done are typically they will focus in on one person. That person is singled out, right? And she did use, it's funny now when I read the old filings, you can see where they were trying to drop us some hints, because it was her, Ann Taylor was like, it's almost as if there were 5 cousins and you only focused on one. And I'm like, 4 brothers, Brian, like, it's funny how when you look at it. But anyway, Bicca Barlow basically was talking about, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. Holy shit. I'm sorry. What was I saying? I
What
totally.
the and I could back what you're saying, where they focus in on the one person. It absolutely happens that way. Even if they know there's more than one person, they
Mhm.
gravitate to getting that one person. Let's just say, like, when they came after the little group of individuals I used to play on the playground with,
Mhm.
they would come get one of us, and then they would focus on prosecuting that one of us because they felt like if they could get us boxed in enough, we would give up the others. So
Okay.
even when it is a multi-perp crime, they can still
Mhm.
focus on one and work their way out off of that one. But
Mhm.
what I'm seeing happening in the Idaho 4 case is they focused on one and were just excited and content on the one.
On the
They never
one,
were
right.
willing.
Right. So
Yeah.
here's my question. Here's my question. That's what I was trying to. That now I remember the connecting thought. Thanks for picking up for me. The Bicca Barlow thing, right? The Bicca Barlow thing. So she was kind of alluding to the fact that it was one, but what you're saying that makes sense. But then someone said something like Ann Taylor at one point said Bryan was chosen for this a long time ago, as if like there was some old vendetta or something, had you heard that or what? I feel like that's just a rumor. I don't know.
I've seen the rumblings of it. I've
Yeah.
seen the rumblings of it, but you I
I don't know what it means,
I haven't dug into that. I haven't done due diligence into that.
Well, me
For
neither.
something like that to be, it's like you're almost stating someone was set up. This person was in the past was going to be the patsy, no matter whether it was 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 22
Yeah.
years ago. I mean, I had people messaging me about him being, the one chosen for this when he was literally 12 years old. So,
Hmm.
I
I'll be
don't
honest.
discredit people's
Yeah.
thoughts. I don't fall into a lot of theories. I don't
Yeah.
discredit thoughts or opinions. I just don't fall into a lot of the theories.
Yeah, because they can't be proven and you can speculate on them for forever. And at that point, just like you could write a book or something, like it's fiction at that point. There's no, so I kind of dabble into both. But I do really try to, stay grounded in the facts, which are few and far between in this case. Um,
Well, I think that's the hardest part about this, and you and I are on the same page. We like facts. We like
mhm,
speaking upon facts. We like
yep.
truths. We like honesty. We like and that's something that I've grown into really enjoying in life now is the capability of looking for exactly that.
Hmm.
And we don't like it when we can't go from one bulletin point to the next without anything that makes a little a sense of why you would connect the two.
Yep.
So the facts here are so widespread out
Hmm.
that they just don't make sense, and when they don't make sense, they feel fuzzy to me, and in my life experiences, fuzzy means not always honest. It
Yeah, I
means
agree
there's
with
some
that. Bingo.
dishonesty there.
Absolutely. Yep.
So,
Yeah, when it gets this complicated with things that really shouldn't be this complicated, I'm like, well, I really feel like you're bullshitting me right now. Like, I really feel like you're misleading me intentionally because you have things that you don't want me to know about. And that's what this whole freaking case feels like, you know?
well,
And
I've never been involved in a single case in my life ever, 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 where the lead investigator used the words, "I don't know, I don't remember, I can't recall," on the main evidence of the case. So, do you
that, yeah.
remember these videos that you use to track the main suspect's vehicle of the crime? No, I
Hmm.
don't recall that. Do you
Hmm.
even remember the color of the car you claim was in the neighborhood when the crime was committed? No, I don't quite remember that either, but I think it was blue, maybe white, maybe red, but it could have been black, but maybe it was pink, but I can't
And
recall.
I worked
Don't
with a
hold me to
team.
that.
I like the other one they used. I worked in a team. It was a team effort. It was a team effort. We
Yeah.
all did all these things, which means nobody did anything, which means nobody has any
Right. Well,
accountability.
no, I mean, maybe they worked as a team, but it's just too bad Brett Payne was a water boy, so he was rarely in the huddle. He was more often over at the thing filling up the cups with water, so they
Yeah.
didn't really clue him in. They just said, "Hey, do you mind turning in these pieces of paper as our affidavits to the judge?" And just put your name on them. That
Yeah.
way you
Yeah.
look like a fool at the end of the day, not me. You know, I
Right.
mean, I could just see the conversations like Brett Payne.
Mhm.
Why don't you go turn it in? Well, I'm not
Mhm.
allowed to. Why aren't you allowed to turn them in? It's just an affidavit. No, it's got to be in your name. But why? We can't tell you that. Just go turn them in.
You
Okay,
want
I'll
to catch
do it.
this
But
guy or not?
yeah, does that mean I get promoted? I get to wear a helmet next week at the game? I mean, come on. I mean, that's what it feels like to me. And
I
he's stuck
totally
to
agree.
that
It's
now. Now we're
hilarious.
gonna have a trial where Ann Taylor's gonna not only have Brett Payne on the stand saying, I don't know, I don't recall, I don't know, I don't recall, because he can't change that because it would be
Mhm.
perjury. But then
Mhm.
he's gonna have the main eyewitness of the case get up there saying, you know, I just don't know if I was dreaming or if I was awake. But
Right.
I remember a vacuum cleaner walking through the living room. And, you know, I didn't know what I was hearing, but I saw the bushy eyebrows. I swear I saw the bushy eyebrows. And I want to say he was white. I know he was white. I just don't know how he was white, but I know he was white. And Ann Taylor's going to sit there shaking her head, going, do I even need to ask another question, Your Honor, or should this prove that this witness should
Look,
not
she
be
was tripping.
testifying?
She was tripping balls, okay? This girl can't help us. I mean, it's
Your
crazy.
Honor, I would like to be direct with the witness, if I may. Were you smoking weed or were you high as a kite on crack? What were you doing that night? I mean, please tell me the truth. I don't know. I was in fantasy land. I don't know if I was awake or sleeping.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Your Honor. Thanks. We rest. Get this bitch off the. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
I
whatever.
mean,
But
well, I still am very, I mean, people don't, I struggled saying this for the longest time. Then I was like, no, I'm just gonna. It's just the truth. Like I struggle with their story, Dylan and Bethany. I struggle with that a lot. I, I believe women are capable of vicious crimes. Okay. And, I'm not saying that that's what I think happened, but I don't rule it out. Honestly, there's too many suspicions around. I mean, they don't want to release this 911 call. In the beginning, I don't know if you remember, there was Ethan Chapin's, I think it was his sister-in-law or something. She was verified on Reddit, and she went on there and said, we want Dylan to explain herself. Dylan and Bethany, they were calling back and forth. They heard cries. They heard scuffling. I'm going to take that for true because they verified it. And so, when I hear things like that, I really struggle with what happened that night. And if she had something to do with it, I don't know.
I mean, I hate people say, well, females couldn't be this violent. Look
Oh,
at
hell
Jodi Arias.
no. Mm-hmm.
Look at Jodi Arias.
Touche.
I will.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you, I was locked up in Arizona. I had to ride a van to court when she was in the front of the van. So she's sitting in the cage in the front of the van, and us gentlemen are all cuffed together in the back, which is, that's not fun to be cuffed to other stinky people that don't believe in showering in jail. But,
Right. Yeah. It doesn't
you
sound
could
good.
hear her. She's humming away. She's talking to the drivers as if life is just great. And I
Mm-hmm.
still remember her looking over out the window, and she's just like, well, I'm never going to see these lands again. And, I wonder if I'm going to be put to death or if they're going to let me live. Either way, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, man, this woman's crazy, like literally
Wow.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just shows you, I mean, not anybody, but most of us, if we're put in the right situation, could do something crazy if we had to.
Yeah.
But some of these people choose to do something crazy when they don't have to. So,
Right.
do I think Dylan Mortensen could be a little nutty up in the head, kind of comparable to maybe a Jodi Arias? Is a possibility. I wouldn't put it past her because you
Yeah.
just don't know. But I
Mm-hmm.
know, that the investigation didn't do any justice in the way that they interrogated or interviewed her. I call it the same thing, interrogated or interviewed. The minute
Yeah.
that young lady said she didn't know whether it was a dream or if it was real or true, you end the conversation at
Yeah.
that point, and it's
Absolutely.
it's no
Agreed.
longer a valuable conversation at
Wait,
that point.
revisit it, get her medical help, whatever. If it's post
Right.
traumatic, get that shit taken care of, then interview her. No, I agree with you. And Steve Gonsalves said something in an interview that you'll probably remember when he said they asked him, Olivia, and Christy if there was anybody they thought was maybe cleared too quickly, and they didn't want to name any names, but he said, well, I think she may have been cleared too quickly. And then he said something about she had a solid alibi, but I think it's weird that they can't tell people what the alibi is. And so I always think of Dylan when he says that, and I could be wrong, but
Which one has solid alibi, Bethany or Dylan?
I it could be either one. I'm guessing because I thought about alibi and I'm like, what would that mean in a situation where you're in a house where murders are taking place? What is your alibi? I mean, you're there, right? So like that's your alibi. I'm in the house when the crime happened. But like in my mind, I painted it to the whole thing where they were texting back and forth during the murders. And so because it wasn't during the timeline of the murder and you could see they're texting, that's the alibi. That's what I connected it as. But this is all, speculation.
Well, shoot, I thought Dylan's alibi was she was face to face with a bushy eyebrowed vacuum cleaning perpetrator, and they were doing the two-step on the way out the back sliding door. I mean, I thought that was the alibi. She just didn't know if it was real or if it was in fantasy world. But look, I this investigate and I can understand the victim's family's frustrations in the way that this investigation was conducted in the local community. They maybe didn't know behind the scenes what the FBI was doing, which is, again, unfair to everybody because it should be done in the open, out in transparent. This is where we're at in the investigation. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Because I'm telling you right now, and I know this, I know it for fact. If that was me in that interrogation room instead of Dylan, if that was me, I'd be wearing cuffs and they would sit me in a jail cell until they cleared me, which is hard to clear me considering I'm in the house when the crime happens.
Right.
Awake.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on this. Like,
now you got to clear me. And they're not going to let me out of jail till they clear me because it would be a capital murder case. And they do have ways of holding you in there on lesser level of charges until they clear you. They could have easily taken Dylan into custody and charged her just with some basic misdemeanors, and even though,
underage drinking,
she would have had
maybe,
a
or
bail
whatever.
or something.
Yeah.
Anything, and yes, she would have had a bail, but in those bail scenarios, the judge imposes the fact you can't leave the area, you can't do this, you can't do that. So now you got the ability to further your investigation into that individual, and literally all you have to do is charge her with a felony, and you get her DNA, and you get the things that you could utilize in your investigation. So Bethany might be a little bit different, but we also don't know the full spectrum of Bethany because we don't know, where was she in the house? What does she, all we know is, what they've released so far and not really spoken of. But then I see a document that's up there that's a fully sealed and redacted document to protect a house roommate, which they haven't protected Dylan at all. No. They're not protecting Bryan by these sealings. They're not protecting Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, or Xana. I just have this idea, and if it's not Bethany, then there was somebody else in that home. I'm still formulating in my mind there's somebody else that was in that house when this happened. That's why we heard very early on about 5 people. 4 deceased, 1 leaving in an ambulance. I heard that
I remember
numerous
that.
different ways. And that mistake doesn't happen.
No,
that doesn't happen. That mistake does not happen in cases like this. So I still, to this day, wonder who was sleeping on the couch in the living room, who was
Mhm.
downstairs with Bethany, that came back from the frat house or whatever party, and they were hanging out downstairs. I wanted to say what boyfriend was in the room with Dylan, but from what we understand, her boyfriend Quinn was somewhere else.
Yeah, and he
So
had a
there's so many
Snapchat.
thoughts. Right. There's so many thoughts in my mind is who else was in that house that is legitimately being protected? And there's your
Mhm.
confidential informant as well, because maybe they didn't
Oh.
see everything and they can't testify to who, why, and all that.
Mhm.
And maybe they really legitimately were intoxicated and can't put together a timeline,
Mhm.
but there are enough information to kind of tie some loose ends up, and that's a confidential informant for you.
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
still kind of looking at that. I wish I could get a little more like just opening of the documents
Yeah,
of the
for
court
proof or
records and of the
whatever.
information.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's a good
I
point
just
though.
kind
Like,
of
what if that other person, say, like, this is, we're speculating, but like, what if that other person that could have been there was selling drugs or something like that? And so, like, they're like a drug connect for somebody or whatever.
well,
And
I think where this could legitimately be showcases release the 911 call, because I believe the potential person that was in the home is the one that made the 911 call. Um,
oh,
I think it's been pretty clear that it's not Dylan that made the call. It's pretty clear
mhm,
it's not Bethany.
mhm,
They said that it's been somebody else from inside of that grouping of individuals. Look, we don't know who came to the house. We don't know why.
mhm,
Do we know that Dylan summoned these people? Do we think Bethany summoned these people? Is there a third person that was in the home that potentially summoned these people? Or was it
mhm,
potentially that person that actually called 911?
mhm.
And we would know a lot of those answers just by the 911 call, and that's why they're not going to let it out.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I looked it up actually because I wanted to know if there was a law that said that 911 calls had to be released to the public. And guess what? There was up until like 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, they changed it and they made it one of these like, discretion type bullshit things. I was like, you son of a bitch. Cause I mean, there were a couple that I really wanted to hear over the past few years that I haven't heard. And that's why they changed the law, which is crazy.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in public awareness and public knowledge. I guess maybe because of my background of being a criminal, I've kind of formulated the thought process. It's a good thing for the community to know what's happening within their community to
Mm,
diffuse not only fear, but also anger and confusion and just
mhm.
stacking the deck against people that may not be involved instead of, just whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, everything about this case, the beginning was lies,
Mhm.
misinformation, misdirection. Then it worked itself into being caught in those lies that these people were not sleeping. They were not this. They were not that. So now they're backpedaling away from those lies, trying to tell half truths to cover the lies, but relay, we have some half truths to give you. And now, literally, with everything being sealed and redacted and closed, the only reason why these things are coming to light is because Ann Taylor's a good enough attorney to know the process and the system of how to work these motions appropriately.
Mhm.
She most likely, at the end of the day, would have told you they had no shot at a Franks hearing. She probably, in her heart, knew they didn't have a shot, but
Mhm.
damn, she didn't get that information out there through those motions to suppress,
Mhm.
and then that
Mhm.
hearing, she even got the judge to talk about things like blood on the handrail and
Mhm.
things of that
Mhm.
nature,
No,
which if
that's
anybody out there wants
right.
to say,
Mhm.
this is not true, that evidence is not true, the very judge of the case talked about it.
And
Like,
and
don't tell me
possibly
it's not
somebody
a part
else,
of this
right?
case.
Well,
Right.
how yeah, exactly,
So
and he even brought up the quote third party issue, which I thought was interesting, and I hope
right.
she uses against him when she argues that they should be able to bring it up, because he even said it. And I know
I
we
mean, I
talked
think
about
it's
that
pretty
before.
clear. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I felt it all along. There's someone else involved in this case, and
Mhm.
they know who that somebody else is.
Mhm.
He's not or she's not in custody,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that they're alive, and it doesn't mean that they haven't been arrested yet. There's other
Right.
people involved in this case. This is
Yeah.
not a one-off, we got the right guy, because not everything would be sealed and redacted like this if they got the
True. That's
right
so
and
true.
only guy,
Yeah, and the
you
IGG
know?
is out
I'm
now. I
sorry.
mean, we kind of know what's going, not all of it, but we kind of have a pretty good picture at this point, verified by court documents. So that I thought that was a big secret for a long time, and it was, but that's out now. So what the hell are you? What are you hiding? And 100 subpoenas in the grand jury. I mean, that's a lot of like investigating people, right? Isn't it subpoenas? You're calling someone in to testify. I don't know if that's a lot. It sounds like a lot for a grand jury. Maybe not. I don't know. Unless it's a big ass trial
Yeah.
investigating all kinds of stuff, right?
Well, that's typically my experience and what I would throw my 2 cents into, that this investigation led in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, yes, the IGG came back to Bryan Kohberger, but I believe they were on to somebody prior to Bryan Kohberger. That's
Mm-hmm.
why they collected DNA off of a cigarette. That's why, yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, and I'm not saying he's guilty or involved or anything, but I think that they were looking at Brent Kopaka,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, the situation got out of hand with what happened to him, and I think that could have played a role. And many people feel like the information about, Bryan Kohberger could have came from Brent Kopaka's very own cell phone.
Mm-hmm. I've heard
And that
that.
could
I
be
mean,
true.
there's no proof, but
Yeah.
like it's plausible, right? Like it's definitely plausible.
Well, there's
And
no proof because everything about the Kopaka situation is sealed and redacted too.
doesn't make any damn
Come on.
sense.
I mean, everything that's happening in the time frame of November 12th
Mm-hmm.
all the way through today is sealed and redacted. I mean, I'm surprised the
Yeah,
people that are getting caught with petty theft at Walmart's not being redacted and
I
sealed.
know. Well,
I mean,
yeah, if they saw
you know,
Bubbly Waters reports, they would start redacting that shit because
yeah,
she starts putting some
I'll tell
stuff
you what,
together sometimes that's a trip. You know what I mean?
she,
But
she, yeah,
no, it's true though. It's
she
true.
digs.
Yeah, she does. She does, right?
She digs.
Um, it's interesting though. Yeah, I'm just very I'm very
I,
enthralled with this case because of all the different angles and stuff like that. But
I'll tell you what I'm excited for is opening statements.
mm-hmm,
I'm excited to see because you're gonna be able to tell a lot in the opening statements.
yeah,
When the prosecution steps up to the plate to state they got the very person right here before you in this courtroom. This is the one. This is all it's
mm-hmm.
done. And then what's going to be very interesting, and if I were the defense, I would have Massoff do my opening statement. I think she's amazing at delivering.
That's who I think is
the-
gonna do it. That's what my guess was gonna
yeah,
be. Yep.
I think she definitely delivers the best message to the surrounding. I think Ann Taylor's the dissector of the
Mhm.
cross examinations. Like she's going
Mhm.
to get you to tell on your own self based upon
Mhm.
the direction she takes her questions. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't want her to do the cross examination of me. I'll tell you that right now.
She's
No way in hell.
disarming. She's very
I'm
clever. The
telling you,
way she's very smart and dedicated. No, I have so
she
much
is.
respect for her, honestly.
I think Massoth needs to do the opening statement. Been very well spoken, very, very just, kind of casual with the way she does
Yeah,
it,
she's
and she's gonna be well
authoritative. She
liked.
comes off as an authority and well liked. Absolutely. I
Mhm.
agree.
Right.
Absolutely.
The jury's gonna gravitate to her, and
Mhm.
I'm interested in seeing in that very opening statement, not her just surmising you got the wrong person,
Mhm.
but maybe lean credence to you got the wrong persons. Like there's more than this.
Right,
You
right,
guys are
right.
gonna. I'm kind of waiting in it to say your minds are going to be blown in what we can present to you in the avenues that lead to a range of individuals, not an
Yep.
individual.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the prosecution's held its stance the way it has because they want Bryan Kohberger to point fingers.
Mhm.
They do this. This is prosecution's
Oh.
way of doing things. They'll let you sit and sweat, and all the way up until the end of the day, they'll hold you to the highest of standards, hoping that you'll point fingers and give them
Mhm.
hope to get the others, because
Mhm.
it shows that their investigation wasn't conducted properly and they missed the chance for others.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
their only potential to get to others, if Bryan Kohberger has any possible connection to this, is he gives them the others.
Mhm.
Um, it just, I just, Massoff's going to put a crazy spin on this in the very opening statement that the
Mhm.
judge may just have to try to slow down right from the get go. Because I think if you give Massoff and Ann Taylor the edge, they're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
pick up steam, and you're not
Yep.
going to slow them down. You're not
No,
going to
these
slow them
2
down.
women are, and now we have Bicca Barlow, like, he really,
Right.
and that's the other thing I remember when Ann said it in court that, Your Honor, Bryan is innocent and we believe he's innocent. And Mazos said it. And I think it was you that I heard it from, which was, that's not normal. Like, defense attorneys generally don't say shit like that. And so, and
Right.
I believe that, but it's frustrating to me because sometimes people are like, oh, all defense attorneys do that. And I'm like, no, they don't. I've never seen a defense attorney in a trial, and I've watched a lot of them ever say that, maybe while they're arguing or whatever, but like, they're literally saying like, yeah. So what do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. And I do want to let people know in the chat too, because I see it. There is no plea bargain ever coming from the defense or the defendant in this case. When I
I
make the
agree with you.
statement that they're
Yeah.
putting the pressure on Bryan Kohberger to point fingers, I'm not making the statement that they're trying to make him do that and charge him at the end of the day as a committer of the crime, because Bryan Kohberger just might know something, and they know he knows something, even if
Mm-hmm.
he didn't commit the crime. Look, Bryan Kohberger might have gave somebody a ride and dropped them off in that neighborhood because they lived in
Mm-hmm.
that neighborhood, and that stupid idiot, whoever it might be, perpetrated the crime. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows? Who
Mm-hmm.
knows? That doesn't mean Bryan Kohberger is guilty of the crime. It just means he would have some knowledge of somebody he dropped off in the area, and
Mm-hmm.
he's not going to give up that information. Um, I think that the game's not going to work by the prosecution. And when we get into this trial, I mean, my fear of it is Hitler's going to go ahead and just stack the deck for the prosecution and just rely on the appeals to sort it all out when it comes to the IGG situation, because that's what's going to turn this case upside down
Mm-hmm.
is the DNA.
Yeah.
That's what's going to win the case, or that's what's going to lose the case. And I think Judge Hitler's too weak in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that he won't make the determination of, I'm not going to allow that to convict this kid, or to really make some difficult rulings in this case that would really handcuff the prosecution, because
Yeah.
he can absolutely handcuff the prosecution.
Mhm.
um, and if he did that, then here we are, we're going to be sitting here wondering why this has continued the way it has for so long. But he can also very much handcuff the defense, and
Yeah.
then just say, I know that the appeals court is going to hear this. I know they're going to look at this because of the IGG in its own
Which is great,
self.
but that whole time Bryan is in jail. You know what I mean? Like, Bryan's sitting in jail. And
Yeah.
so it sucks, like, if that's, and I believe
So,
that's his attitude and a lot of judges' attitudes, because they don't want to get the backlash from the community and whatever else it is.
well, people have to understand too, Bryan Kohberger will be in prison for years before he gets sorted out in the appeals court.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, it could be in front of an appeals court quickly.
Right.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It still takes too long. It still
Yeah.
takes too long.
Yeah.
I've appealed before. I've appealed all of my charges, even the ones I was guilty on. I appealed,
Hmm.
and I never won.
Mhm.
because I never had the patience to wait it out. I just gave up. I was just like, "You know what? I'm already here. I'm already serving my time." And then, when you look at your calendars, because we're all idiots when we're locked up and think that the calendars matter. So we write up these calendars of when we may be going home. And then we realize they're 52 pages long. And we're like, oh, Jesus, what did I do? Um, at some point, you're just like, when you're in year 6 or 7 and your appeal still hasn't gotten in front of the judge yet, you're like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen. It doesn't matter. Scott Peterson is still in the battle of his life, and he's 20 years into this. The Mendez brothers now could potentially have some new developments in their ordeal, and the judge even passed that on, saying, "Well, I want to hear from the parole board
I
first
know.
on
I
how
was
they
like,
feel." So
"Come
that's a whole,
on, man. Let these kids out. Like, come
yeah,
on." Yeah, I saw that.
and the scary part of that is if a judge is willing to handcuff and handicap the defense, well, then you better be pushing this into the Supreme Court and get it into the Supreme Court even before you make a ruling of guilt or not guilt in the
Yeah.
state court, so that we
Mhm.
can determine whether you're going to flip this over on the IGG or not. Make
Yeah.
that determination in advance. Get it done. Get it over
Yeah,
with.
no,
Go
I
through
agree
that
with
whole
you.
process,
I agree with you.
you
They
know?
do need to get it done in advance because it just saves everybody a lot of time. A lot of time. Because doing it this way
You could be
seems
doing it at the
backwards.
same time.
Yeah.
You can do
Yeah.
it at the same time. The
Mhm.
Supreme Court could be ruling upon the IGG and hearing all of that testimony while the time frame of Bryan Kohberger's trial and their
So could
motions are all happening
so
in the
could would
state.
it be Anne would Anne, would they have to get the approval from the judge to do that during the trial? Because otherwise I would think they should just do
Yeah.
it, right?
Well, right now, Ann Taylor should just go ahead and file and just say, "Hey, look, we already know what the combatant is. We want to file to the Idaho Supreme Court based off of your denial of our motions for suppression
Mhm.
and for the Franks hearing.
Mhm.
So right now, we want to get everything to the Supreme Court based upon your latest rulings. We
Mhm.
can still move forward with what we have on the docket right now, discussing the very things, but we need to get in front of the Supreme Court to see if they will make a decision
Mhm.
on this and this and this. And then
Mhm.
we're going to know right at that point, based upon that decision, where we go from there. Because
Mhm.
if you go to the Supreme Court and they overrule Hitler's denial of some of those suppressions, and now
Mhm.
all of a sudden the arrest warrant and everything's out, and that
Mhm.
included evidence, we
Mhm.
don't need to continue the process. We're done.
Yeah, we're
We're
dismissed.
done. The case is over.
Yeah, dismissed,
It's gone,
exactly.
okay? And at that point, the prosecution's gonna be smart enough to not even bring the charges back up because the Supreme Court made the decision
Mhm.
on these very issues. So where does the prosecution go from there anyway? Because everything they do in the state court from that point on is now being reviewed by the Supreme Court automatically, and they're just gonna deny things. So,
That makes a
Ann
lot, and
Taylor,
that's what they did with Judge Galt, right? Like, when the defense attorneys got thrown off the case, they appealed to a higher court and got her overruled, like we were just talking about earlier. So, that would be great if they do this. I mean, I hope, I would imagine they
and
will.
I know Ann Taylor knows far more, you know, yeah, Ann Taylor knows far more than I do about anything, probably even how to put my pants on correctly. She could probably do it better than I do. But at the end of the day, I know it's in their wavelengths of what they're looking at. It's just a matter of
Mhm.
timing. And I
Mhm.
just I hope for Brian's sake, because sitting in jail sucks,
Mhm.
and it's even more stressful when you don't know what the next day lays for you, and it also sucks for the victims' families. It sucks for everybody.
Mhm.
Um, get the ball moving. Get it in front of the people that could literally make the final decision.
Mhm.
The state court will not be the final decision in Bryan Kohberger's innocence or
Yeah,
guilt
definitely
or
not.
verdict
No,
or
I
death
agree with
penalty.
you.
It's gonna be at the Supreme Court at some time, so why not start that process
Yeah,
now?
just do it. No,
Just
it's
do it.
it's a
Just
fair
get
point.
over there, and if Hitler may show Hitler will show what type of judge he is if he denies that motion to go to the Supreme Court. If he denies that,
Hmm.
you know you got a problem on your hands. You know that
Yeah.
this case has a problem, that this is going to be a very dictated trial
Hmm.
by a prosecutor-friendly judge,
Yeah.
and it's still going to end up in the appeals court after the fact
Right. In
anyway.
the Supreme, you're
So
right, but
he should just
yeah.
take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You
No,
know,
that all makes the most sense, actually. Well, I know in Karen Reed's where they appealed to the Supreme Court in Massachusetts, it took them like 3 months to come back with the decision, but that's a lot faster than if they came back with the right decision, it would have been a dismissal. So um, it's worth
well,
it.
I
It's
mean, if you think about it right now, if he filed today and got
hmm
Hitler's permission to do it within the next week,
hmm
and then he got it over to, the in front of the eyes of the Idaho
hmm
Supreme Court, and they
hmm
decided to hear it and see it, and you used a
hmm
time frame of 3 months, which, people say that's a long time. It's really not.
it's not with
3
all this.
months still.
Yeah.
Well, it gets us in well before the trial, so it
Yeah, good
doesn't
point.
even derail the time frame that Hitler's put in place to get this to trial. It wouldn't even take it off those tracks
Mhm,
unless um, the Supreme Court stepped in and says, "Hey, we're taking this on now. We're gonna have this
mhm,
battle in our court, so you're gonna
mhm,
freeze yours," because
mhm,
they can tell the state to freeze, and
mhm.
then they'll make the decision at that point. But then, once that's happened, we all know what's gonna happen in the
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
That finalizes everything in the
Mhm,
case.
yeah, no, it definitely
So,
does.
um, then you move
We can pray for that outcome. We can hope and pray for
somebody
that outcome, you know?
we'll see what happens. I did see Elizabeth Wagner wants me to cover the Melendez brothers, and I'm actually working on content on that right now. I've been kind of following where it stands, and I want to get it out there. I want to kind of discuss, how that process happens when you're looking at an appeal, and then the appeal palate wants to go to the parole board to make a recommendation on you, because I've been in that situation where, it was like, man, I'm going to win my appeal. Oh,
Mhm.
wait. Instead, they want the parole board's information on what they feel like it's going to be for me. And it's like, I'm not getting my appeal. I'm going to go
Ugh,
back to my cell and just lay into my pillow. But
mhm.
so I'm going to do some, a little bit of work on that for everybody to see that. So
Oh, cool. I'd like to hear
it's
that.
it's been an awesome conversation. I know we're going
Yeah,
on 2 hours. I know you
yeah.
probably have a life,
Yeah, I'm getting
and
well, it's actually more I just get a little tired, like, when I have lively conversation. I think I said this before, it's like my meter runs out after an hour or 2 depending on how exciting it is, and this has been really interesting, so, um,
well,
but
what it means is we can do it again.
yeah, no, that sounds great. That we'll definitely do it again. I think it would be fun, so I'll hit you up on that. But, thank you
Most
all for
definitely.
being here so much, and thanks for collabing again like this. This was awesome.
Yeah,
And
most definitely. I know we probably didn't cover all of our topics, but I mean, that's just because we get the gift of gabbing and we talked some cool stuff. So it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
yeah, no, it doesn't. We hit on a lot of really cool stuff, and I think people are interested. So I think it's great. So we'll definitely do this again.
Great crowd. I'm very thankful for all of them, and I'm thankful for you. And we'll talk again very soon.
All right, cool. Thanks, AR.
Yep.
I'm just gonna put
Yes,
in
ma'am.
some. I'm gonna put in some outro music here, guys, if I can figure it
Can
out.
I dance? Can I dance? Can
Yeah,
I
you can
dance with it
dance.
all? I can dance. I
All
can
right, here
even
we
let my
go.
hair.
Let me pick one here. Where are we? Block party. That's what I want. Here we go. Bye, guys.